If you had told me a few months ago that I'd willingly walk into a gym, I probably would have laughed. Me? The guy who preferred late-night snacks over push-ups? The one who claimed that running was only for people being chased? Yeah, that guy. But lately, I've been feeling stuck. My clothes didn't fit like they used to. My energy was low, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw a face that seemed tired of making excuses. So one morning, I told myself enough. I searched for the nearest gym, found one with decent reviews, and made a silent promise that I'd at least try. Worst case, I'd fail and could go back to blaming genetics for my lack of abs. The moment I stepped inside, the air hit me, a strange mix of metal, sweat, and determination. The clinking of weights echoed like background music, and the steady thump of treadmills filled the space. Everywhere I looked, there were people in perfect rhythm, lifting, running, stretching, moving as if they'd been born in this place. And then there was me, standing near the entrance in my brand-new gym clothes that felt way too crisp and obviously unused. I was seriously considering turning around when a voice cut through my hesitation. First time here. I turned to see a man approaching me. Broad shoulders, athletic build, and a confident stride that made him look like he owned the space. His face was friendly, his smile easy, the kind that put you at ease without even trying. I admitted, scratching the back of my neck like a nervous teenager. Can you tell? He chuckled. A little. I'm Amir, one of the trainers here. Don't worry, I've seen plenty of first-timers. Come on, I'll show you around. Something in his tone was reassuring, like I was in good hands. He led me through the gym, explaining what each section was for: the cardio machines, the weightlifting area, the mats for stretching and core work. He even pointed out the water station and the best spot to store my bag. When we reached the dumbbell rack, he picked up a small weight and demonstrated proper form. Posture is everything, he said, his voice calm but firm. Doesn't matter if you lift heavy or light. If your form's wrong, you'll hurt yourself. I nodded, trying to mimic his stance, and he adjusted my shoulders gently. Better, he said with an approving smile. We moved on to a few more exercises, simple ones, but enough to make my muscles realize they'd been dormant for far too long. My arms ached almost instantly, but I didn't complain. Something about his presence made me want to push just a little harder. Between sets, we talked. He asked about my work, my eating habits, even whether I got enough sleep. I found myself opening up more than I expected, telling him how I'd been feeling sluggish and wanted to make a real change. You're doing the right thing, he said, handing me a water bottle. Most people never even take the first step. You did. Those words stuck with me. It wasn't just encouragement. It felt genuine, like he believed in me even though we'd just met. By the end of the session, I was drenched in sweat and breathing heavily, but for the first time in a long time, I felt good. Not just physically, but mentally. I'd pushed past my hesitation, and instead of humiliation, I found kindness and guidance. Before I left, Amir clapped me lightly on the back. Come back tomorrow. Same time. We'll keep it simple for now. Build your base before we go harder. I smiled, surprised at how much I was looking forward to it already. Yeah, I'll be here. As I walked out of the gym, the smell of metal and sweat didn't feel so intimidating anymore. In fact, it felt like the beginning of something new. The next morning, I showed up exactly on time, which for me was a miracle. I half expected Amir to be busy with someone else, but the moment I walked in, he spotted me from across the room and waved me over like an old friend. You came back, he said, grinning. I knew you would. That simple greeting made my chest feel lighter. He wasn't just being polite. He sounded genuinely pleased. From that day onward, going to the gym became part of my routine. I'd walk in, and somehow, Amir would always make time for me. Even on days when the place was packed and he was darting between clients, he'd check in, correct my form, or ask how my day was going. Sometimes he'd stop mid-conversation with someone else just to give me a thumbs up across the room. It wasn't just a training. It was the way he noticed things. One afternoon, I was doing shoulder presses when he walked by and asked, "So, did you end up making that omelet you were talking about yesterday?" I blinked. "You remembered that?" "Of course," he said casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Protein in the morning is good. Keep it up." It was strange in a good way. Trainers must meet dozens of people every week, but somehow He remembered my little details. What I'd eaten, how late I'd stayed at work, the fact that I mentioned my legs were sore after our last leg day. And it wasn't just words. There were the small gestures, too. The way he'd adjust my elbows during a bicep curl, pressing his palm lightly against my arm to guide it into the perfect angle. The quick pat on the back after a tough set. The approving nod when I hit a clean rep. None of it was overbearing. It just felt like he was paying attention, like he was invested in me doing well. I began to notice something else, too, his tone with me. It was warmer, softer. When he spoke to others, he was professional and direct. With me, there was always this slight curve in his voice, a hint of humor or playfulness tucked into his words. One evening, we were finishing a circuit. I was drenched, my arms trembling from exhaustion, when he suddenly leaned on the bar next to me and said, "You know, you're special." I laughed nervously. Special how? Like special needs? He grinned. "No, idiot. Special as in, you've got good potential. You actually listen, you try hard, and you're consistent. Most people don't have that." It was such a simple compliment, but it hit deeper than I expected. I never thought of myself as someone with potential in anything physical. For years, I'd written myself off as the unfit guy with bad stamina. And here was Amir, saying I was worth the effort. That night, lying in bed, I caught myself thinking about the way he'd said it. Not in a generic motivational poster kind of way, but like he meant me specifically. It made me wonder more about him. Who was this guy who could push people so hard and still make them feel seen? Over the next few weeks, I started asking him little questions between sets. Where he was from, how long he'd been training. He told me he'd been a personal trainer for almost 10 years, that he loved helping people transform their lives. He'd grown up playing sports, had even competed professionally in his 20s. There was a pride in his voice when he talked about his clients, like each one was a personal project he was proud of. The more I learned about him, the more I looked forward to our sessions. Some days, I dragged myself to the gym after a long day at work, feeling too tired to care about squats or deadlifts. But then I'd see him waiting by the rack, smiling at me like I was the reason he'd stayed late, and suddenly the fatigue would fade. And I realized something important. The gym wasn't just a place for me to lift weights anymore. It had become a place where I felt noticed, valued. One night, after we finished my cool-down stretches, he said, "Tomorrow, come a little earlier. I want to give you some extra training, work on a few things we don't usually have time for." I raised an eyebrow. Extra training? Sounds serious. He just smiled mysteriously. "You'll see." That night, I went home with my curiosity buzzing in the back of my mind. I didn't know what he had planned, but I knew one thing. I'd be there, early, ready, and maybe even a little excited. It was near closing time when we finished my last set for the day. I was still catching my breath when Amir leaned against the weight rack and said casually, "Come early tomorrow. I'll give you special training." I tilted my head. Special training? What's that supposed to mean? He smirked. "You'll find out. Just be here by 7 a.m. Trust me. It'll be worth it." The way he said it, half serious, half teasing, stuck with me all evening. On the way home, I kept wondering what he had planned. Was it a new workout routine? Some advanced technique? Or maybe he just wanted to work with me without the usual crowd. By the time I got home, I was oddly excited. I laid out my gym clothes right away, my best pair, the one that actually made me look like I knew what I was doing. I packed my bag carefully, double-checked my water bottle, even set 2 alarms to make sure I wouldn't be late. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the empty gym, the sound of my footsteps on the mats, Amir's voice guiding me. I told myself it was just another workout, but deep down, I knew it felt different. The next morning, I arrived 10 minutes early. The street outside was still quiet, and the gym's lights glowed softly against the early sun. When I stepped inside, the difference was immediate. No clanging weights, no chatter, just the faint hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic thump of music playing low in the background. Amir was already there, leaning against the front desk with a coffee in hand. He grinned when he saw me. "You're early. I like that. It's not every day I get special training," I replied, trying to sound casual even though my stomach was full of nervous energy. He led me to the stretching area first. "Before we get into anything, we're going to loosen you up properly," he said. His voice had that same steady confidence, but it felt more personal somehow, like it was meant just for me. He started with basic stretches, hamstrings, shoulders, back, but instead of just demonstrating, he moved closer, gently adjusting my arms or pressing his palm against my back to help me lean deeper. Each correction was careful, deliberate, and I could feel the precision in his touch. "Better," he murmured after one adjustment. "Your muscles will thank you later." As we moved on to the warm-up sets, his tone shifted slightly. More playful, more teasing. "You know," he said as I held a plank, "you've got a good frame. Once we build some strength, you're going to look, well, let's just say yummy." I laughed, not sure if I was supposed to take it seriously. "Yummy? Is that a professional term?" "Absolutely," he said with a grin. "It's trainer code for looking good enough to get noticed." It was lighthearted, but something about the way he said it made my face feel warmer. The workout was different from my usual routine, slower, more focused. Between sets, he explained why each movement mattered, how it targeted specific muscles, and what improvements I should expect if I kept at it. But there was also a softer undercurrent to the session. The gym was so quiet that every laugh, every small comment between us seemed amplified. During one set of assisted pull-ups, he stood close behind me, hands on my sides to steady me. "Breathe," he said softly. "In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't fight the movement, control it." I felt a strange mix of flattered and uncertain. This wasn't the same as the usual form checks in a crowded gym. This was something else. It was attentive, almost personal. At one point, while I was catching my breath, he sat on the bench next to me and said, "I like sessions like this. Just you and me. No rush. No distractions." I nodded, unsure what to say, but I could feel the truth in his words. The absence of other people made the space between us feel different. Not just trainer and client, but something quieter, closer. By the end of the hour, my muscles were exhausted, but my mind was buzzing. As I packed up my bag, Amir clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "Good work today. Same time next week." I smiled, still a little caught off guard by the whole experience. "Yeah, I think I can make that happen." On my way out, I caught myself glancing back at him. He was watching me go, that same easy smile on his face, the kind that made me wonder what exactly special training meant to him. The next early session started much like the last. The gym was nearly empty, the music low, and the faint hum of the air conditioning filling the silence between us. Amir greeted me with that same warm smile, tossing me a bottle of water before we got to work. We moved through warm-ups quickly, a few stretches, some light cardio, and then on to strength training. He had me working on weighted squats that morning, explaining how engaging the core and back muscles together could improve balance and posture. I was mid-rep when he stepped closer. "Hold still for a second," he said, lowering his voice just enough that it felt like a private instruction meant only for me. He placed his hand on my lower back, fingers spread slightly as he pressed lightly against the muscles. "Right here," he continued, "this group controls a lot more than you think. Stability, posture, even your breathing." The touch was firm but not rough, guiding my hips slightly forward to correct my stance. Yet lingered just a moment longer than I expected. His voice softened as he spoke, less the crisp tone of a trainer and more something else. Almost like there was emotion tucked into his words. "You've got good strength here," he murmured. "Better than you realize." A flicker of uncertainty passed through me. I wasn't sure where this was headed, but I could feel an invisible shift in the air between us. As he moved his hand away, I found myself hyper-aware of its absence. My mind began to churn with questions. Was that just normal trainer stuff? Or was there something more to it? When he stepped behind me for the next set, he adjusted my shoulders and arms again, his hands brushing against my skin in a way that made my breath catch. That small, warm pressure sent conflicting signals through me. Part of me thought, this is crossing into something else. The other part, the quieter but somehow stronger part, didn't exactly want him to stop. At one point, as I straightened from squat, I felt his hand settle briefly on my side again, steadying me. I turned my head slightly and said with a light, almost nervous laugh, "Hey, careful." He looked at me with a smile that reached his eyes. "Relax. I'm just making sure you're doing it right. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I know. Just you're close. That's because I'm focused, he replied, his tone low but calm. You're doing great, and I want to make sure you feel it. It was hard to argue with that. And truthfully, the more he stayed near, the less I wanted to pull away. As we moved on to other exercises, cable rows, core planks, his compliments became a little more direct. You've filled out since you started, he said during one set, his eyes scanning me with the same precision he used for posture checks. Your shoulders are broader. Your back stronger. You're starting to look, well, impressive. I try to shrug it off with a grin. Guess I have a good trainer. He smirked. You have more than that. You got drive. Not everyone does. Somewhere between the pull-ups and the last round of stretches, I realized my body was no longer tense when he guided me. In fact, I felt strangely at ease, like his presence had become part of the rhythm of the workout. His hands correcting my form didn't make me flinch anymore. They made me focus. The session ended with him leaning against the wall beside me while I caught my breath. He crossed his arms, watching me with that same easy smile. You did well today, he said. Better than last time. Thanks, I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. Felt different. How so? He asked, tilting his head. I hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Just more connected, maybe. He didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes said enough. He felt it too. As I packed up my bag, I couldn't shake the thought that something had shifted between us. The training was still there, the technique still solid, but now there was a layer of unspoken understanding, maybe even trust. And as I walked out of the gym, I realized that I wasn't just thinking about the workout anymore, I was thinking about him. Over the next few sessions, I noticed something had changed inside me. That initial edge of nervousness, the cautious voice in my head telling me to keep my guard up, had quieted. Instead, I found myself leaning into the closeness, appreciating the way Amir's presence made me feel more focused and, strangely, more confident. When his hand rested lightly on my back to correct my stance, I didn't overthink it. When he stood just behind me to spot a lift, his voice low and steady in my ear, I welcomed it. I realized I wasn't tense anymore. I was actually enjoying the attention, his encouragement, and the way his words seemed to settle right where I needed them. One quiet morning, between sets of push-ups, I asked, So, do you ever get tired training people? He laughed, shaking his head. Not really. Some clients, sure, they can be draining, but when someone actually listens, puts in the work, that's the best part of this job. He sat down on a bench next to me and took a sip of water. I didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a trainer. I grew up playing sports, competing. I loved it. But after an injury ended that chapter, I realized what I really wanted was to help other people feel strong. Not just physically, mentally too. The way he said it carried a weight I hadn't heard before. It wasn't just a job for him. It was a calling. And I could tell he meant every word. The more he shared, the more I felt the atmosphere between us shift into something warmer, more trusting. We started laughing during workouts. Not the awkward chuckles of two people unsure of each other, but genuine bursts of shared humor. Sometimes it was a bad joke about my form. Other times it was me teasing him about how seriously he flexed when demonstrating an exercise. One day, after a particularly tough session, I was packing up my things when he stopped me. Hey, he said, almost casually, how about we make this official? No fees, no packages. I'll train you for free. I blinked. Wait, what? What? He shrugged, but there was a softness in his eyes. Because I want to see you grow stronger. You got the kind of commitment I don't see often, and honestly, I like working with you. So let's just do it. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. It wasn't just about the money, it was what the offer meant. He didn't see me as just another client. This was personal. That's really generous, I managed. Thank you. From then on, the way we trained felt different. Without the pressure of schedules or payment, we had more time to focus. Some mornings, he'd spend an extra half hour with me just because we were in the middle of good rhythm. And it didn't stop at the gym. Amir began texting me outside of sessions. Little reminders to drink more water, quick tips on what to eat before a workout, even the occasional don't skip leg day with a winking emoji. Sometimes, if I mentioned I was feeling sore, he'd send me a quick home stretch routine or a short video to follow. He even started checking in on my meals. One afternoon, I sent him a picture of my lunch, grilled chicken and vegetables, and within seconds he replied, "Perfect. Keep that up and you'll see even more progress." It felt good to have someone care about my progress that much. But more than that, it felt good to have someone care, period. The bond we were building went beyond workouts and reps. It was in the way he celebrated small victories, like when I hit a new personal best, with the same enthusiasm as if I'd won a medal. It was in the way he noticed when I was tired and adjusted the session without making me feel weak. It was in the way he seemed to believe in me, even on days when I didn't believe in myself. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of Amir as just my trainer. He'd become a friend, a mentor, someone whose opinion mattered to me far more than I'd expected when I first walked into the gym. Over the next few weeks, my reflection in the mirror started to change in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just the faint outline of muscle on my arms or the way my shirts fit a little better. It was the way I stood taller, how my smile came easier, and how I walked into the gym without that initial hesitation. I felt lighter somehow, not just physically, but inside. Every session with him wasn't only about lifting weights or perfecting form. It was about pushing past limits I didn't know I had. He noticed everything. The way I could now hold a plank longer, the extra reps I managed without collapsing, the new steadiness in my breathing during runs. He'd give me this proud nod, sometimes a quick clap on the shoulder, and it was enough to keep me going. Somewhere along the way, our conversations deepened. It wasn't just about fitness anymore. We'd talk about movies, music, and even random life stories. He told me about his first job, his family, and how training people gave him a sense of purpose. I shared little bits of my life, too, and he always listened like it mattered. One morning, he asked me to finish my workout a little early and stay behind. I was curious, but didn't question it. When I came back from the locker room, I saw a small table set up near the corner of the gym. On it were a few bowls of fruit, protein bars, and smoothies. There was even a single candle flickering, more for fun than drama. He grinned sheepishly and said, "Progress day." I laughed, a little embarrassed, but mostly touched. "You didn't have to do this," I told him, and he just shook his head. "You've worked hard," he said, leaning on the table. "When you first came here, you looked, well, let's say you weren't sure if you belonged. Now you walking like you own the place. You've come a long way, and not just with your body." His words hit me harder than I expected. I thought back to my first day, the nervous glances, the clumsy movements, the feeling that I was out of place. And now here I was, not only stronger, but more sure of myself. We sat there for a while, talking between bites of fruit. He told me he was proud, and I realized I was proud of myself, too. I wasn't just chasing muscles anymore. I was building something else, confidence, discipline, and this unexpected friendship that felt solid and real. When it was time to leave, he handed me a small note. "This is your new program," he said, "but don't look at it until tomorrow." I laughed, wondering what he was plotting. Later that night, I opened it to find a neatly written plan, but at the bottom, he'd added, "Let's keep going. I want to see you get even stronger." It wasn't just a training plan. It was a promise. As I got into bed that night, I thought about how strange life can be. One small decision, walking into a gym for the first time, had given me more than a healthier body. It had brought me a mentor who pushed me, a friend who believed in me, and a part of myself I didn't know I was missing. The next morning, I was up before my alarm. My gym bag was already packed. I couldn't wait to see what was next.